So this video has been a long time coming. Today we are going to be tier ranking every single book that I read in 2024. I realize it is almost February, but hopefully this is still interesting. I'm gonna start with just some stats about my year of reading because I think it's interesting, and just like little updates on my life and reading goals. So if that does not interest you, you can skip to this time here for the tier ranking. If you are interested, then let's get into it. I have my laptop here. Starting with my Storygraph 2024 reading wrap up. I don't use Storygraph. I want to because it's so much more comprehensive than Goodreads, but I'm so used to Goodreads. So I just imported my Goodreads data into Storygraph so that I could get all these like fun stats about my year in books. Last year, I read 44 books, which my goal was 60. So needless to say, we did not hit that. However, I'm trying to give myself some grace because I had a very, very busy year. Specifically, November and December were just like stressfully, chaotically so busy, which is kind of why I took January off from doing anything. I really just needed to like rejuvenate myself a little bit. But this year, my reading goal is 50 books. Hopefully, I think that's a bit more doable for me. And as long as I don't go through like 2 months where I only read one book, I think that we're on track to hit 50 books. Let me know what your reading goal for 2025 is if you set one. Going into my stats here, the first book I read was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, and the last book I read was Reckless by Elsie Silver. And you can kind of see how chaotic my 2024 reading was. I started the year off so strong by reading 3,000 pages and 6 books in January, and then 5 books February, 8 books in March, which was the first 24-hour readathon, and I think that contributed to a good portion of those books. And then you can see the huge drop off here. April I read 1, May 2, June 2, July 1. So that was like a 4-month period where I literally read like 6 books, which is unheard of for me in the last few years. But I was in such a bad reading slump. I don't know why. And this is kind of when I went into my 911 fixation, the TV show, not like the 911 operators. Like, I'm not that crazy. But we picked it back up again with a second 24-hour readathon in September, which got my books up a little bit. But then October, November, and December were still a little slow. So I'm hoping to have a more like straight kind of even graph this year. That's the goal. My most popular genre was romance and then contemporary, which I was surprised by. I thought fantasy would be second. I think romance, like, things can be 2 categories though, so I think that's probably a lot of romance books. And then my longest book was House of Flame and Shadow, which was 951 pages. Not surprising, that's a thick book. My shortest book was Small Things Like These, and that was 118 pages. And as we can see, we had drastically different times for shortest and longest time spent reading a book. It said it took me an average of 8 days to finish, which I feel like isn't that bad, but that's because I had some books that I read in 1 day and then 51 days to read Powerless by Elsie Silver. Authors I spent the most time with: Sarah J. Maas, makes sense. I reread ACOTAR, and then I read House of Flame and Shadow, and then Jennifer Lynn Barnes because I read the entire Natural series last year. So my average rating was 3.98, which I feel like is really good. I had like a good amount of solid books last year. Not a lot of 5 stars because these 2 were rereads: A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin. So my first 5-star of the year was Funny Story by Emily Henry, which was in like April. We went a long time without a 5-star. And then The 7-Year Slip, Project Hail Mary, Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, and Fourth Wing, which is also a reread. As we can see, the majority of my books were rated 4 stars, which I feel like is solid. And then I have like an even amount of 3.5 and 4.5, which is also pretty solid. So I'm pretty happy with this. No 1 stars, only 1 2-star. Overall, I feel like it was a pretty good reading year. Even if I read less books, I think I read more books that I really enjoyed, which is nice. Let's jump into the tier ranking list. So my tiers this year are very similar to my tiers last year. If you watched my tier ranking video for the books I read in 2023, our top ultimate tier is Occupies All My Thoughts, and these are going to be like 5-star reads. And then next tier is Loved It, Would Recommend. These are like solid 3.5-star books. It was fine. Like it's like a 3 stars, you know, like a solid 3 stars. Haven't really thought about it since, but I enjoyed it at the time. I would probably recommend it. And then our next tier is You've Been Demoted, and this is the tier for all the books that I rated in the emotional high of finishing the book, and then looking back on it, I don't think deserved as high a rating as I gave it. And then finally we have This Was a Crime, which are books that just were not for me. Not even necessarily like a 1 or 2-star book, like they were just not for me. The first book here is The 7-Year Slip, which this is not in the order that I read these books. I think I read The 7-Year Slip in like August. There's a reading vlog on my channel of that. But this is going in Occupies All My Thoughts. We Are Starting Strong. I loved this book so much. It made me so emotional. It made me cry. I still think about the quotes from this book. It's so beautifully written. I can't wait to read more of Ashley Poston's books. And then ACOTAR, honestly, the series as a whole is definitely occupies all my thoughts. Like, it is truly one of my favorite series of all time. I like comfort books for me. But I'm gonna put A Court of Frost and Starlight and Loved It Would Recommend because it's kind of a more chill, like holiday novella almost with the characters. Court of Mist and Fury occupies all my thoughts. By far my favorite book in the series. Court of Thorns and Roses, like, I'm putting all three of these in occupies all my thoughts. Sorry, I love them. I love it so much. All In, which is either book 3 or 4 in the Natural series, I'm gonna put that in Loved It Would Recommend. And then Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This was one of my 5-star reads. That is going in occupies all my thoughts. I have fallen in love with Frederick Bachman's writing. He has such a beautiful way of describing like the mundane things in life, and he will make me cry in every book. I read Beartown this year, first book of the year. Incredible. Like, had me sobbing. And Anxious People was a very like inspirational, kind of motivational, bright side of humanity kind of book, and I really, really enjoyed it. Bad Blood in the Natural series, I think that's book 3 or 4. I really don't remember. I'm also gonna put that in Loved It Would Recommend. The series was really fun. Like, I sped through it. I really, really enjoyed it. Bride by Ellie Hazelwood, I'm gonna put in Loved It Would Recommend. This was her first paranormal romance book, and I ate it up. I loved it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, and it was so much fun to read. The characters still had the kind of signature Ellie Hazelwood quirky comedy to it, but it was a romance between a werewolf and a vampire, arranged marriage, so many fun tropes, and like a mystery in the background. It is a little bit of a peek into the Omegaverse. So proceed at your own risk. Next, I have The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I think I gave this book 4 stars, and I think I'm gonna put this in You've Been Demoted, which I feel terrible doing because, like, love Britney Spears. What she's been through is horrific, and this was a really interesting read, but I just feel guilty giving a memoir less than 4 stars because I'm like, this is someone's real life, but I feel like this could have benefited from some editing. It did really feel kind of like a diary, which I think works for it being a memoir, but I also found it kind of hard to follow because we were kind of jumping around a lot and it felt very stream of consciousness. So I think I would probably give it like a 3.5 instead of a 4. Next is Cultish. It was fine. These were ones I listened to in audiobook, both The Woman in Me and Cultish. Cultish, I honestly thought I would find more interesting than I did because cults are fun. Don't take that out of context. Cults are interesting. It didn't grip me the way I wanted it to, but it was fine. And then The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I think this is going to go in You've Been Demoted. And I just think this year was the year I realized that I don't want to read YA romance anymore. I think I've kind of outgrown it to the point where I now just find it a little bit cringy and not super relatable. This one, I think I gave 3.5 stars when I read it. It's a time loop Valentine's Day concept. It was cute. I think it was a fun concept, but I don't know if I would give it, I'd probably give it like a 3, like a solid 3. Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret. I'm gonna go Loved It Would Recommend. I love Benjamin Stevenson's writing style. It's so unique and comedic and entertaining, and I don't think it's necessarily gonna be for everyone, but I gave his first book, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, 5 stars in 2023, and then I just didn't read another book of his until this one, and it reminded me how much I loved his book. So I'm currently reading Everyone on This Train Is a Suspect, and I'm loving it also. Then I have Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I'm gonna put that in It Was Fine. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I can't really remember. I think I went into it with too high expectations, and it ended up kind of just being okay. It was fine. Next we have Fourth Wing. This was a reread, and it's going in Occupies All My Thoughts. I'm sorry, I am a fantasy romance girly first and foremost. And I reread it, and it was even better the second time. I've already finished Onyx Storm, by the way. It's back here on my shelf. Let me know if you've read it, please. I'm literally dying to talk to anyone about it because no one I know has finished it yet. Next, we have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It feels a bit like a crime for me to put this in It Was Fine, but it was fine. I enjoyed it. Like, I actually was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. It was very entertaining. However, it was written in 1818, so there's only like so high I can rate that, I feel like, but it's a great book. Like, I recommend reading it. Then we have Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is going in Occupies All My Thoughts. I love Emily Henry. I will do anything for her. Funny Story was no exception. 5-star book. My first 5-star of the year, technically. And it's basically like this really convoluted situation where our main character has like her engagement broken off by her fiance, and then she ends up moving in with her ex-fiance's new fiance's ex. and it's great. Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. I think I'd also put this in You've Been Demoted. I feel bad because I love Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, and I feel like every book I've read from her afterwards hasn't hit the same. And Happily Never After was such a fun concept, but I honestly think this is the book that put me into my 4-month-long reading slump. And I think I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars, and I didn't love it. Next we have Heartless Hunter. I loved this book. I'm putting in loved it, would recommend. This was such an interesting, I think it's a YA fantasy book. Our main character is a witch, and then the enemies to lovers kind of situation in this is a witch and a witch hunter. The world was really easy to understand. There was lots of action, balls, and like very kind of Bridgerton-esque at certain points. Like it was just so fun, and I am really looking forward to the second one. Heartless by Elsie Silver. Loved it, would recommend. I honestly don't know which is my favorite in the Chestnut Springs series. I have not read Hopeless yet. I'm thinking my favorite is probably either Flawless or Reckless, I would say. But Heartless I really enjoyed, so it's still gonna stay in loved it. House of Flame and Shadow. I think I'm gonna put this in You've Been Demoted. I gave it 4 stars, and I think part of that was just because I went into it with really high expectations, and I didn't want to not like it, and I basically just didn't love it, and I was sad that I didn't love it, and I was trying to convince myself that I did love it, but I didn't. So I gave it 4 stars. I don't know if it's deserving of 4 stars. It's more because of the like nostalgia of all the characters that are in it that made me give it a higher rating than I think it probably deserved to get. I feel like it was way too long, and it was a little hard to follow. If We Were Villains by Emma Rio, I'm honestly going to put this in Occupies All My Thoughts. I was shocked by how much I loved this book. I have a reading vlog for this on my channel, and I think I read it in like 2 days, and it was incredible. I didn't think I would like a drama, kind of dark academia book about Shakespearean actors in college, but I ate it up. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars, I think I gave it 4.5, is because it has a very open ending, and that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to spoil it, but an open ending in a way that kind of pissed me off. Otherwise, it would have been a 5-star book. It's so good. Definitely read it if you haven't. And then Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I'm going to put in loved it, would recommend. The cover of this book is so beautiful. I have it on display here. And I think this was a 4.5-star book. It made me so emotional. I could not put it down. Read it in 2 days. I am truly a converted Abby Jimenez fan because at the beginning of 2024, I did not think I liked her as an author because I read The Friend Zone and I didn't like it. And then I just never read another book of hers. But every book I've read other than The Friend Zone from her has been like 4.5 stars. And I can't wait to read more of her books. Then we have Killer Instinct, which I believe is the second book in the Natural series. It was fine. The thing is, I love the series, but like I wasn't super invested in the first 2 books necessarily, and I don't remember anything about it, and the love triangle in it did annoy me a little bit. Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I think I give this 4 stars. I don't know if it's deserving of 4 stars. I'm gonna put that in You've Been Demoted. I read this while I had a fever, so it's processed in my brain a little bit like a fever dream, and I think I give it a higher rating than I probably would have if I had not been feverish when I read it. Huge twist at the end, crazy plot. Riley Sager usually delivers on the twist at the end. This one was like a little out there, and I honestly don't really remember it. Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, however, I'm gonna give loved it, would recommend, which I think is kind of a bit of an unpopular opinion. I know some people didn't love this book, and I feel like it was a little different from what he normally writes, but I loved it, and I thought it was such an interesting story with such like a different take on a normal like thriller mystery, and it had kind of like a heartwarming ending, which you don't expect from a thriller, and I liked that, so really enjoyed that one. Not in Love by Ellie Hazelwood, I'm gonna put in It Was Fine. I feel like I went into that book with low expectations because so many people were hating on it, and I quite enjoyed it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. Not my favorite book by her. I think it was a bit of a different book from her, which was cool because there was a little bit more grittiness to these characters. I appreciated that they felt very like real and human and 3-dimensional. Off to the Races by Elsie Silver. It was fine. Don't really remember it, I have to be honest. Powerless by Elsie Silver. I'm gonna put in You've Been Demoted because I give it 4 stars, but it took me 52 days to read it. 52 days. That's so long. By the time I picked it up, like each time, I'd forgotten what had happened, and I just never cared to pick it up. And I just feel like Jasper and Sloane did not interest me the way the other couples have in the series. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is an Occupies All My Thoughts. This was also a huge surprise for me. I gave this book 5 stars. It is my favorite book that I read in 2024, which I never thought would be a sci-fi book with no romance, but it is. And if you have not read this book, read it, please. It will make you you laugh and make you cry, and it's so weirdly positive and heartwarming, but the stakes are so high, but it also doesn't feel that high all the time because it's like just one guy. I would do literally anything to erase this book from my mind and read it again for the first time. So I'm definitely gonna be rereading this one like yearly. I love it so much, and I can't wait for the movie. I think they're making a movie in 2026. Then we have Reckless by Elsie Silver, which is going in Loved It, Would Recommend. This one I read way faster than Powerless. I liked the couple a lot better, and I know a lot of people, I think it is their favorite book in the series, and it's accidental pregnancy trope, which I again was skeptical, but everyone says like, oh, I hate this trope, but not in this book, and they're right. I loved it. I ate it up. Rule of the Aurora King by Nisa J. Tooley. This is the second book in Trial of the Sun Queen, and that's going in This Was a Crime. This was my only 2-star book of the year, and it was so disappointing after the first book. I gave the first book 4 stars, and there was trials, and there was romance, and the stakes were high, and then the second book just like fell flat. It happens to a lot of books or fantasy series where like the first book has like these really high stakes and this really like structured storyline where there's like trials and acts and stuff, and then you get to the second book and the author kind of like doesn't know what to do now that there's not that structure, and that's kind of what happened in this book. It felt like nothing happened, and it was like 500 pages. And then we have Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I'm gonna put this in Loved It, Would Recommend. I think I gave it 4 stars, but honestly, it's close to being in You've Been Demoted because I don't remember this book at all. I just remember it being kind of slow. But I also remember it being very beautifully written and enjoying learning more about the gods of this universe and kind of the fantasy elements of it, because we didn't learn as much about that in the first book. So I'm going to keep it at Loved It, Would Recommend. Then we have Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I'm going to put in It Was Fine. It was interesting, and it definitely like made my brain work. I don't know. It's beautifully written. I enjoyed it. It was interesting. I would recommend reading it, but not a favorite of the year. Then we have The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. It was fine. I don't know why I keep reading Frida McFadden books because they are always at best fine. It's always good if you need like a quick read. She will usually get me with her twists. I have to give her that. We have The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I'm gonna put this also in It Was Fine. I think I gave the first book 3.5 stars. Very captivating, just like I don't really remember it. It didn't like leave a super long lasting impression. I had to restart my camera, so hopefully everything still looks the same. Next we have The Troop by Nick Cutter. This is hard. This one's really hard. I think I have to put this in This Was a Crime, but like I gave this book 3 stars. Okay, this is not like This Was a Crime in terms of like, oh, it's horribly written or anything like that. It's like that I wish I could unread it because it was so like graphically, gruesomely gory and horrible. Nick Cutter's an incredible horror writer. Like truly, if you like body horror, like read his books, you'll probably love them. I just am still haunted by this book, and it's been months. It was an experience. I went into it pretty blind, and if you want to read it, then I recommend also going into it blind. But if you are not sure if you would enjoy it, I would look up trigger warnings. It has everything you can imagine. This is how you lose the time war. I am going to put this in You've Been Demoted. Again, I feel bad because this is like a very renowned book, and it was beautiful. It was such a beautiful book. That being said, it was very hard to follow. It's basically these 2 characters who are on opposite sides of a war in time and space, and there's no like timeline. You're kind of just floating like in and out of time. And I gave this 4 stars because I thought it was really, really well done. Also because I read this book also while I had a fever. I don't know why I got sick so many times in 2024. It was actually unfair. I think I might have like in my feverish state been like, whoa, and rated it really high. But like if I went back, I would probably give it 3 stars, 3.5, something like that. Then we have Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. I'm gonna put this in Loved It, Would Recommend. I read this in the second 24-hour readathon video that I did, and it took me like pretty much the whole time to read this book. I really enjoyed it, and I really like the Kingdom of the Wicked series. I think it's such a fun concept to have the personifications of the 7 deadly sins as kings in hell. But I recommend if you want a good chill fantasy romance. Then we have Trial of the Sun Queen, and I feel like I have to put this in You've Been Demoted because I give this book 4 stars. I loved it. I had such a good time reading it. I read this in the first 24-hour readathon, but then the second book was so disappointing that I'm like, I can't in good faith recommend reading Trial of the Sun Queen if I know that I would not continue the series. Otherwise, this book would be in Loved It, Would Recommend. Like, I really enjoyed it. We have 12 by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I'm gonna put in It Was Fine. This is just like a novella at the end of the Natural series, and I don't remember anything about it. honestly. When in Rome by Sarah Adams. I'm honestly gonna put this, I think, in You've Been Demoted. I did not love this book. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars, but for like a good portion of the book, it was gonna be a 2-star book for me. Like, I really was not enjoying it. I found it very cringy, and it was just like not for me, like the writing style and everything. And I ended up giving it 3 stars because there was like the last 20% I enjoyed a little bit more, but I don't know if that makes it 3-star worthy, and I don't think I would read another Sarah Adams book. Then we have Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, and I'm gonna put that in Loved It, Would Recommend. This is like a fun take on a time loop, and it's a thriller about this woman who watches her son kill a man, and she wakes up the next morning and it's the day before, and then she just keeps waking up like further and further in the past, all to solve the mystery of like how her son ends up getting to a point where he kills this man. And lastly, we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and I honestly think I'm going to put this in Occupies All My Thoughts. This was a 4.5-star book for me. I don't fully remember why I didn't give it 5 stars, honestly, but I loved this book. I read it so fast. Jacob, the main love interest in this book, is maybe one of my favorite book boyfriends ever. He has social anxiety and I love him. I really enjoyed that one. And this is all the books I read in 2024, and I'm pretty happy with this lineup because we've got some good Loved It and Occupies All My Thoughts. So let me know if you've read any of these, if you enjoyed them, what your thoughts were. Let me know what your goal for 2025 is. I am very curious. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a little bit of a long one, but I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Bye.